there is no doubt that a problem in one African country will likely affect other countries. This was a piece of advice given by our founding fathers during the 1963 Addis Ababa conference. The founding fathers during the sitting maintained that African leaders and African countries needed to solve problems within nation states. They needed to ensure the total liberation of African countries to achieve the total liberation of Africa. According to them, a problem for one was a problem to all. That is, according to the founding fathers in 1963. The same approach applies to the Africa of today, and I believe it will still guide Africa to the future. A problem in one African country tends to affect other African countries. When there is war in one African country, then that war will likely affect other African countries. And according to the founding fathers, war in one African country needed to be solved. There was to be peace in every African country for Africa to be considered peaceful. Today, and at the time of making this video, there were many independent African countries that were at war, and it seems that other African countries that are peaceful are not concerned at all. This contradicts the approach of our founding fathers. Our founding fathers emphasized the need for African leaders to solve conflicts in every African country to ensure peace in Africa as a whole. One of the countries which is at war today is Sudan, and the president of Sudan has delivered a very bad message to Africa. He has reiterated what the founding fathers reiterated in 1963, because African leaders have failed to solve the war in Sudan. They have failed to engage the leaders in Sudan in order to restore peace. So the Sudanese leader had this to say yesterday. According to one of the reports on our global dailies, Sudan leader warns war could spill over into neighbors. Sudan is a country in Africa, and I just want to look at Sudan on the map. When you look at Sudan, Sudan has neighbors, and the Sudanese president is telling its neighbors that the war is about to affect them. Now, when we look at Sudan, Sudan is a country in East Africa, and among its neighbors of Sudan in East Africa include, among others, Kenya, just a minute, I just want to be very specific. Now, when you look at Sudan on the African map, its neighbors include Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Egypt, Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda. Now, those are neighbors of Sudan, and the president of Sudan is telling its neighbors that the war in Sudan is about to spill over to these countries. Libya is currently at war. Chad is currently at war. Central African Republic is at war. Democratic Republic of Congo is at war. Uganda is peaceful. Kenya is peaceful. Ethiopia is at war. Eritrea is peaceful. Now, the countries which are likely to be affected by this war, which are currently peaceful, include Eritrea, Kenya, Uganda only. What is the president of Sudan trying to say? He is not just saying that the war is coming, but he is communicating something. According to me, the president of Sudan is telling its neighbors that since the country embroiled in a conflict from April this year up to now, there is nothing that has been done to solve this war. There is nothing that my neighbors have done to settle the differences between the two leaders in Sudan. He is trying to urge the African Union to revamp efforts and restore peace in Sudan. He is just trying to remind these neighbors about what the founding fathers said in 1963. The founding fathers, like I said, told African leaders that every African country had to be free for Africa to be considered free. And I say today that every African country must be peaceful for Africa to be considered peaceful. If one African country is not peaceful, if one African country is at war, then it means that the whole of Africa is at war. A simple message for African countries and a simple message for the African Union. Central African Republic is at war. Chad is unstable. Libya is at war. Egypt is unstable. Eritrea is stable. Ethiopia is at war. Kenya is unstable. Uganda is unstable. Democratic Republic of Congo is at war. Sudan is at war. The African Union and individual presidents in these African countries must restore peace in Africa. They must take every initiative to ensure that every African country is peaceful. When there is war in Sudan, it should mean that there is war in Africa. When there is war in DRC Congo, it should mean that there is war in Africa. If there is war in the Central African Republic, then this should mean that there is war in Africa. I think the current African leaders, the current African presidents, must understand what the founding fathers said. The founding fathers said that peace in one African country means peace in every African country, and war in one African country means war in every African country. If one African country is unstable, if one African country is at war, then it means that Africa is at war. And at some point, if these leaders ignore this message, they ignore this message and they focus on their independence, their sovereignty, and ignore what is happening in Sudan, ignore what is happening in DR Congo, and ignore what is happening in Central African Republic, then Africa will be affected. There will be adverse effects on Africa. Peace in DR Congo means peace in Africa. Peace in Central African Republic means peace in Africa. Peace in Ethiopia means peace in Africa. And peace in Sudan means peace in Africa. If Sudan is at war, then Africa is at war. It is upon Africans and African leaders to solve the Sudan conflict, and it is upon Africa and African leaders to solve the conflict in DR Congo. It is upon Africa and African leaders to create peace, to restore peace in West and Central Africa. If this is done, then I believe Africa will progress. Remember, one of the problems facing Africa today is civil wars. One of the main problems facing Africa today is civil wars, and these civil wars can be solved by Africans themselves. Africa must not be made to believe that they can only restore peace in Africa if they invite foreign governments, and they can only restore peace in Africa if they invite the United States to train their soldiers, if they invite Russia through the Wagner Group to train and man their military equipments, military positions, Africans must not be made to understand, to believe that they can only be successful in restoring peace if they invite France or the United Kingdom to solve their issues. The issues that affect Africans can only be solved by Africans. The issues that affect Africa today can only be solved by Africans. And an issue, if there is a problem in one African country, that means a problem to the whole of Africa. And this is why the founding fathers emphasized the need for African unity. They emphasized the need for the creation of a united Africa, like the United States of America. They required a united Africa which was founded on a joint military, such that if there is a problem in South Africa, that is a problem that is addressed by the whole of Africa. If there is a problem in North Africa, Libya, that is a problem that is addressed by the whole of Africa. If there is a problem in East Africa, Somalia, that is a problem which is addressed by the whole of Africa. If there is a problem in West Africa, let me say in Burkina Faso, or let me say in Niger, if there is a problem in Niger, that is a problem for the whole of Africa. And if there is a problem in Central Africa, that is a problem for the whole of Africa to address. This is the kind of solidarity that is required for the success of Africa. And this is the kind of solidarity that the founding fathers rooted for. If Africans embrace this kind of solidarity, then I think Africa will be a better place to live. If African leaders embrace this kind of solidarity, then Africa will progress and there would be peace in Africa. It is never late for African leaders to join efforts and solve the wars in DR Congo, the wars in Sudan, war in Ethiopia, Somalia, Central African Republic, and the rest of the countries at war today. If African leaders realize that a problem in one African country is a problem for the whole of Africa, then they will be available and they will take maximum efforts, optimum efforts to solve the war in Sudan. I think that is a priority. Solving the wars in various African countries is a priority, and I want to humbly encourage African governments to revamp efforts through the African Union or through individual presidents join together and solve the wars in various African countries. And with this, I think Africa will be peaceful, and with peace, Africa will be progressive. With progress, Africa will reduce and alleviate poverty, which is one of the key challenges in Africa today.